France and Algeria find themselves locked in a diplomatic crisis, the most serious since Algeria's independence in 1962. This escalation stems from a series of events that have inflamed historical tensions and ignited fresh grievances. The situation reached a boiling point in March 2025 with the reciprocal expulsion of diplomats. This tit-for-tat measure, a stark symbol of deteriorating relations, was triggered by French legal action against Algerian nationals. At the heart of the dispute lies the case of Amir Boukhours, an Algerian critic of the Algerian government, who was allegedly kidnapped in France. France suspects the involvement of Algerian agents in this affair, a claim Algeria vehemently denies. Adding fuel to the fire, France issued an ultimatum to Algeria regarding the readmission of Algerian nationals facing deportation from France. This demand, coupled with threats of visa restrictions, further strained the already fragile relationship. The diplomatic standoff has been amplified by accusations from both sides. France alleges that Algeria has engaged in a campaign of economic retaliation, blacklisting French companies and sidelining the French language in its education system. Algeria, in turn, criticizes what it perceives as a deleterious climate created by France, accusing its former colonizer of disrespect and interference. This war of words, coupled with concrete actions like the expulsion of diplomats, has brought relations between the two nations to a precipice. The situation is deeply concerning, raising fears of a complete diplomatic rupture and jeopardizing vital areas of cooperation, particularly in security matters crucial for the Sahel region. The current crisis is exacerbated by two high-profile cases, the Boukhours affair and the Sansal affair. The Boukhours affair, which began in April 2024, revolves around the alleged kidnapping of Amir Boukhours, a vocal critic of the Algerian government from French soil. Boukhours, who was granted asylum in France in 2023 after serving a prison sentence in Algeria for his activism, vanished under mysterious circumstances. French authorities suspect the involvement of Algerian agents in Boukhours' disappearance, pointing to the Algerian government's history of silencing dissent. Algeria, however, has vehemently denied any involvement, dismissing the accusations as baseless and politically motivated. The Boukhours affair has become a lightning rod for broader tensions, further straining the already fraught relationship. Adding to the diplomatic friction is the Sansal affair, which erupted in November 2024. Boualem Sansal, a renowned French-Algerian writer, was arrested and imprisoned in Algeria for comments deemed critical of Algerian territorial integrity. His arrest and subsequent 5-year prison sentence in March 2025 sparked international condemnation, with French President Macron calling for his immediate release. Sansal's case, like Boukhours', has tapped into deep-seated anxieties about freedom of expression and the limits of dissent. For many observers, these cases exemplify a broader pattern of repression in Algeria, targeting voices critical of the government. France, bound by its own principles of free speech, and its historical ties to Algeria, finds itself caught in a delicate balancing act, seeking to defend its values without further inflaming the situation. The current diplomatic crisis cannot be understood in isolation. It is deeply intertwined with the long and troubled history between France and Algeria, a legacy marked by colonialism, violence, and unresolved grievances. The Algerian War of Independence, from 1954 to 1962, a brutal chapter in both nations' histories, continues to cast a long shadow. For many in Algeria, the current crisis is viewed through the lens of this unresolved past. They see echoes of colonial attitudes in France's actions, interpreting them as a continuation of French interference in Algerian affairs. The perception of a persistent colonial unconscious in France, particularly among certain political circles, fuels resentment and mistrust. Domestic political pressures in both countries exacerbate the situation. In France, the rise of the far right has contributed to a hardening stance on immigration, directly impacting the large Algerian diaspora in France. The French government faces pressure from right-wing elements to take a tough stance against Algeria, further limiting its room for maneuver. Algeria, too, is grappling with internal challenges. Social and economic problems, coupled with the legacy of the Hirak protest movement, have created a climate of uncertainty. In this context, the crisis with France can be seen, in part, as a way for the Algerian government to project strength and rally nationalist sentiment. However, this strategy carries risks. potentially backfiring and further isolating Algeria on the international stage. The escalating tensions between France and Algeria carry significant potential consequences for both nations, extending far beyond the diplomatic realm. The most alarming prospect is that of a complete diplomatic rupture, a scenario that would sever vital channels of communication and cooperation. Such a break would have far-reaching implications, particularly for regional security in the Sahel, where France and Algeria have been key partners in combating terrorism. Economically, both countries stand to lose from this standoff. French companies heavily invested in Algeria face an uncertain future, vulnerable to boycotts and retaliatory measures. Algeria, in turn, risks losing access to French expertise and investment, further hindering its economic development. The energy sector, a cornerstone of the bilateral relationship, is also at risk. France relies heavily on Algerian natural gas, and any disruption to this supply would have serious consequences for its energy security. Beyond the immediate economic and security implications, the crisis threatens to deepen the rift between the two nations, making future reconciliation even more elusive. The suspension of diplomatic channels hinders dialogue and exacerbates mistrust, making it more challenging to address underlying grievances. The current impasse also jeopardizes efforts to address the legacy of the colonial past, a sensitive issue that requires careful and sustained engagement from both sides. The path forward remains unclear. De-escalation requires both sides to prioritize diplomacy, exercise restraint, and seek common ground. A return to dialogue, however fraught, is essential to avoid further deterioration and explore avenues for resolving this multifaceted crisis. Failure to do so risks perpetuating a cycle of resentment and mistrust, with potentially devastating consequences for both France and Algeria.